Hello and welcome to It's Free IP. I'm your host, Felix Chaplin, and at the time I'm writing this script, I have just watched the video Animation Before Computers by The Odd Ones Out. It was interesting, but there were two parts that really irked me.
Let's take a look at an old cartoon. The 1968 animated Batman series. It was old, remember? Old things are bad.
I'm pretty sure the second one was just a joke, but in case you couldn't tell, I love old stuff. Furthermore, if it's still copyrighted, it's not old enough for me. In this video, I'll be expanding on stuff from The Odd Ones Out's video and go over some stuff he skipped, with heavier focus on public domain cartoons, of course. Also, if this early animation history tickles your fancy, maybe you'll also like my video about the music industry 100 years ago. Anyway, on with the video. I know the video I'm responding to wasn't intended to be an exhaustive history of animation, but that's not gonna stop me from nitpicking the hell out of it. There's a part of this video in which he describes how a 3D zoetrope is made, but he failed to mention that there's a version of the zoetrope that works for 2D animation. In fact, that's the original form it took when it was invented in 1834. Instead of having to painstakingly put a bunch of figurines on a rotating table and use a strobe light to enhance the illusion of movement, you could make a simpler version whose animations are put on a replaceable strip of paper. To see the animation, you simply spin the zoetrope and look through the slits in the sides to see the animation come to life. There's a very similar device that was invented in 1876 called a praxinoscope. You still spin it, but rather than looking through slits on the side, there are mirrors in the center that reflect the animation on the paper strip, giving the same illusion of movement. If you look in the background here, you'll see another old animation device that he failed to mention. It's called a phenakistoscope, and it was the first animation device, invented in 1832. It has elements of both the zoetrope and the praxinoscope, in that you're supposed to hold the disc up to a mirror and look through the slits on the outer edges to be able to see the pictures moving.
Oh, every animated movie, and animated TV show, and animated anime, before the year 2000-ish, used what's called cell animation.
He seems to be forgetting that there were CGI movies and shows from the 90s. 1995, the year before James and I were born, was a big year for CGI animation, from the release of the beloved film Toy Story to the cursed eyesore of the Transformers spin-off Beast Wars. Going back to that clip where the Odd Ones Out referred to the 1968 Batman cartoon as being very, very old, this streaming service he's showing on the screen has Betty Boop and Popeye the Sailor Man right there, and he couldn't be bothered to talk about them. That nitpick segues into the next section about Fleischer Studios. Toward the end of the video, the Odd Ones Out expressed amazement at the effects that could be achieved by using a multiplane camera. If he thinks that's cool, he should see the 3D sets that were used in the cartoons made by Fleischer Studios. You'd be forgiven for thinking that these cartoons were touched up with CGI, but they actually weren't. Similar to how the multiplane camera used multiple layers to create a sense of depth, Fleischer's 3D sets provided actual depth, and the animation cells were photographed in front of them. Here, The Odd Ones Out explains the broad strokes of how animators used keyframes and in-betweens when animating on paper. Since the video as a whole tried to emphasize how much more difficult animation is without computers, I'll let slide that he didn't bring up Max Fleischer's invention that allows animators to more easily animate realistic motion, the rotoscope. An animator would take live-action film footage and trace over each frame, recreating the movements in the original footage. No keyframes or in-betweens needed. No need to quickly flip through several sheets with drawings on them to make sure everything went well. Just tracing to get great results more easily. If you're a beginner at animation, rotoscoping is a great way to start, at least in my opinion. Speaking of keyframes and in-betweens, those animation techniques were pioneered by the cartoonist Winsor McCay. Falsely crediting himself as the first animator, McCay went from making newspaper comics like Little Sammy Sneeze and Little Nemo in Slumberland to making animations for the silver screen. He made his first film containing animation in 1911, called Winsor McCay, the famous cartoonist of the NY Herald and his moving comics. Today, most people just call it Little Nemo for short. While the film was about 10 minutes long, only the final minute and a half are animated. In 1914, Winsor McCay performed a vaudeville act that involved him interacting with an animated dinosaur. His employer made him sign a new contract barring him from continuing to perform so he could focus on making more newspaper comics. So a new film was made with the animation put at the end and shown in theaters around the country. And that's the story of Gertie the dinosaur. I think Winsor McCay's animated film The Sinking of the Lusitania also deserves a mention, because look at how fluid that animation is. It's an excellent work of World War I propaganda. Now we're gonna veer off what was included in the video entirely by talking about some early examples of films that combined animation with live action. Most people might be familiar with movies like Space Jam, Mary Poppins, and Who Framed Roger Rabbit, but films that combined animation and live action actually date back as early as 1919, when the Fleischer brothers were making their Out of the Inkwell cartoons featuring Coco the Clown. Walt Disney liked it so much that he incorporated it into his Alice comedies in the 1920s. But 2D animation wasn't the only thing being combined with live action footage. Stop-motion animator Willis O'Brien did the same thing while working on the special effects for the 1925 film The Lost World. He would later go on to do the special effects for the original King Kong in 1933, and he would teach everything he knew to another up-and-coming stop-motion animator, Ray Harryhausen. Overall, The Odd Ones Out did a fine job of talking about how animation used to be done. He also gets bonus points in my book for including a clip from Charlie Chaplin's movie The Kid in his video. I love that movie. Also, I saved this for the end since it's not in the public domain, but since The Odd Ones Out mentioned the flipbook animations included in the Animorphs books, I should also mention Fliporama. I loved the Captain Underpants books when I was a kid, and Dave Pilkey also included it in his Dogman and Super Diaper Baby books. That's all the time we have for today. Be sure to let me know what you think in the comments section. While you're down there, don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you won't miss what comes next from It's Free IP.